So our webinar today is going to be on creating part, assembly, and drawing templates to drive standardization and efficiency. The name sounded a lot shorter when I came up with it. Now it's a lot to say, but really we're going to talk about templates and some quick notes on how to get those made and get them started for you, and how they can help you communicate your designs a little bit better. This webinar is part of the Do More with DASI series. There's a whole set of these that you can find on our YouTube channel and through our website as well. A little bit about me. My name is Jake Davis. I'm an application engineer with DASI. I've been with the company about 8 months. I am a Marine Corps veteran. Prior to DASI, I spent 20 years in the industry as a mechanical engineer, reliability engineer, an engineering manager, and a director of operations. I've worked in aerospace, platform integration and avionics, medical device, factory automation, machine design, industrial vehicle design, and I've done a fair amount of consulting for PDM document control implementations as well as lean engineering. I've been a SOLIDWORKS user for about 15 years, and I am a certified SOLIDWORKS expert in mechanical design. Early on in my engineering career, I had this this thought that I was going to, sit down at a computer and design these Star Wars type things that were, going to change the world. And I had all these crazy concepts in my head. And when I actually got into the industry, though, I found that I did get to do that, but not 100% of the time. Once the designs were handed my way and I got started on them, I found there was a lot of this going on as well. And that was something that was a little frustrating for me at first, but once I spent a little bit of time understanding the why behind needing the information and then how to ultimately get it communicated a little bit better, I kind of came to terms with it. So that's the side of the design that we're going to talk about today, is not the design itself, but how we communicate that and how we can make that just a little bit easier for you, maybe with these templates. So we're going to talk about why we use templates. We're going to take a look at templates for parts and assemblies. Those are very similar, so we can kind of lump those into one topic there. We're going to take a look at drawing templates. And lastly, I added this on at the end, was tables, just because they're a little bit different in how we go about creating and saving those templates. So why do we use templates? One reason is to drive standards. Every organization has their way of doing things. You may use different units. You may design all in metric or all in inch, or maybe a combination of the two, fractions versus decimals. Materials, maybe you use the same materials all the time, or maybe you have a short list of standard materials. And then custom information that may apply to how you manufacture your parts or what your customers need to see. We can use templates to reduce data entry. We can have some information pre-filled out for us. And also, it can prompt us to enter the right information. So we can have some things set up so that it's sort of a fill in the blanks for us. And then we can have that, instead of having to do that multiple times through our parts, assemblies, and drawings, we can push some of that information across. We're going to talk about the benefits. Consistent communication. Every time someone in your organization opens one of your drawings or parts, whether it's a designer or somebody on your operations side, they know what to look for and where to find it in there. Efficiency, that time spent on your designs is engineering and not setting up things like material and units and things like that. And the last one is a topic I like to talk about, is just helping to shorten the wall. A lot of times in manufacturing, you hear about a wall between engineering and the different groups that make up the operations side of things. From the operations side, you hear that engineering just kind of slapped the design together and then they threw it over the wall for us to figure out. And engineering saying, well, I gave it to them, but they should know by now how to do it. And these templates can help with that wall. They're not going to knock it all down for you, but they are going to have the potential to provide some of that information on a really consistent basis that can help communicate those designs back and forth a little bit better. So why use templates? Again, we can use them to drive standards, reduce data entry, help us communicate, and shorten that wall a little bit. So let's dive right in and take a look at templates for parts and assemblies. When we look at a part, and SOLIDWORKS has a whole lot of options for us to dive into. We can change how we look at things. We can change the colors. We can change the direction it's facing, the units, all those different types of things. And there's a lot of things. I know some of us have personal preferences that we'd like to turn on, but organizationally, there's some things that we do the same way every time. And templates will actually allow us to capture all of those things and then save them so that we can use them over and over. So if for instance, we wanted to set up this part itself to have very specific units. So maybe instead of 2 decimals, our organization uses 3. And maybe for dual dimensions, we only need 2. And then, you know, et cetera, on down the line, we can customize all these different things. We can customize things like material. Rather than having that not specified, maybe if your company only makes very certain things, or if you wanted to create a template that was pre-populated, maybe a template for steel or a template for aluminum, those types of things, we can pre-populate some of those fields here. We can change the model display. I personally like to have my planes turned on here. If I can get them to turn on. I guess they're hidden here. And I like to start out with my views in a certain way. All of this can be saved. We can even, if we wanted to, we could even rotate the model around backwards and have it start that way if that suited us better. One of the big things I like to customize, and this goes into the communication part that we talked about, is custom properties. We can use this information globally to communicate automatically onto our drawings, information like part numbers, descriptions, who made it, what material it's made out of, that type of thing. I'm going to go ahead and throw a few of these in here so that we can take a look at them later when we get into drawings. If it's not in the list here, you can go ahead and add those things in. I'm going to throw in a number 1 here. I'm going to create one for description, hopefully spelled right. I'm going to put one in for engineer date. I don't know if you notice to the right of these, we can change what types these are. Can have it be plain text, a date, an actual number, or a yes or no question. For our engineer date here, I'm going to go ahead and make this a date so it holds to a format. And then the last one I'm going to add in here is material, because I want this to display on my drawing. And material falls under something we can do a little bit different here. If you look at under this value for what it is, SOLIDWORKS gives us some things that are kind of built in, things it calculates like mass, density, volume, surface area. And there's a pretty big list here. And material is one of those. When we put this in here, we get this kind of almost looks like an email address, but this is saying grab that SOLIDWORKS material at this part. So now that I have some of these things in place, I will say anything on this document properties tab that you change can be saved with the templates. So that does include things like tables, types of text, how your arrows look, even at the part level for some of those annotations that you put in there. The way we capture all of this is to save it actually as a template. So once we've set up the part to look the way we want it to and have everything there, we can come up to File and do a Save As. And rather than saving it as a part, this Save As type here allows us to choose the option of a part template, which is a .prt dot. And you can see it jumps us right to the sort of pre-programmed SOLIDWORKS location. And I'll show you why here in a minute. They don't have to be here. If you are using PDM, we definitely recommend that your templates go into PDM and are captured under a read-only so that they can't get tampered with. For the purposes of this, I just created a folder called Jake's Templates here, and I'm going to call this a webinar part. If I didn't create a new location, SOLIDWORKS has built into it the ones that came when you installed it. If we want to change that, we have to come up here to our options, and not under document properties, but under system options here. We want to come down to file locations, and the one that it always defaults to is document templates. I do have PDM installed, so it's looking there for that. But this is the default one here, program data, SOLIDWORKS, whatever year you have, and then templates. Because I created a new one, I want to add to where it looks for those templates. So I'm going to click the add button, and I'm going to browse to where that location was and select that folder. And I'm going to go ahead and tell it OK. So now when I go to look for, a new part, I have this new location. So here's the one we had before, templates, and you can remove this if you'd like to narrow it down. And then we have Jake's Templates, and here's the webinar part that we created. So if I close out all of this, do a new part, and I select a webinar part, you can see that it opened everything back up the way it was, even with that sort of strange orientation that I had in place. If we take a look at the document units under the properties, we can see that it preserved those settings that I put in place. And if we look under the custom properties of the file here, we can see that the ones that I pre-populated are already there for us. This is really handy if your organization has things that you need to look for on a consistent basis, because your engineers can look in here and it's pretty easy to see what needs to be filled in. So this can really help you with missing things. So if you use number all the time, but there's no prompt for them to put in a number, when we get in a hurry, we can see that it's pretty easy to miss those things. This lets us know, hey, you got to get these specific ones filled out. So we've created our template and we located it, and there's another option that we can do here. Once we've established a file location, we do have to tell the system OK for it to link to that. Right above that, there's a selection called Default Templates. And so we can choose for parts, assemblies, and drawings which templates we want to choose. Currently for parts, we have program data, SOLIDWORKS. That's that default that came with the system. I want to change this over to be this webinar part, so that now if I say a new part, it goes right to that one instead. And if I double click to create a new part, it goes right to my template instead of that default one that was there. By the way, under this, if I switch this over to novice and just select a part, that will also take me to that default location that we just placed in there. So I mentioned earlier that assemblies are very similar, and I say they're very similar. There's a few different options as far as how the assemblies go together and what some of those assembly specific things are, but the method is the same. The difference is just the file extension. When you click that drop down box, it's going to be a .asm dot instead of a .prt dot. So if we look at parts and assemblies again, we went through and to get it going, we opened a part. We changed the specific preferences that we were looking for. We saved the file as a .prt in the location that we wanted it to store. And I do have this is the assembly file extension here. And then we had to go back and we had to set those file locations in default templates. So let's jump into drawing templates a little bit. Drawing templates, and there's a lot that can be done with these, and they tend to be fairly custom to each organization. Before we do that, I'm going to take this part we created here and I'm going to add a little bit of geometry to it so I can put it on a drawing and we can see some of that information that we added earlier. I'm going to go into our properties here and put a little bit of information. And the material I actually need to choose over here. And I'm going to go ahead and save this part and I'll just put it on my desktop as. So I've already gone ahead and made a template to demonstrate this. So when we open it up, it is with an existing template, but we'll dive in a little bit and we'll show how to link some of this information. So I did a new and a make drawing from part, and I'm just going to drop a view on here so we can get some information in there. One of the things we can look at down here in our title block is that there's a lot of information that already filled itself out from what I just populated in those custom properties. There's a couple that are missing here, and that's because these are tied specifically to the drawing and not the part itself. But I was able to bring all the part information across. And even up here in the notes, I put a couple links to things. The model file name is called webinar, and the material went ahead and populated that ABS PC. So from a standpoint of creating a drawing template, fundamentally it's like a part. We want to open the drawing, we want to add some custom features to it, and then we want to save that as a template. But there's a few different things to it. A drawing template consists of a sheet format, which contains things like our borders, title blocks, notes, and then that sheet format is inserted into a drawing that we then go in and set some of those document properties we mentioned before, things like default fonts, what types of units, line styles, those types of things. And then when we save the drawing as a template, it includes that sheet format as well. So one of the nice things about separating that is you can have a sheet format that has a consistent title block and things of that nature, but then you can insert that into different types of drawings and have multiple templates that reference that same sheet format. So in order to edit the sheet format itself and get some of these notes in place in a drawing, we want to right click on this and select edit sheet format. It won't do it if we're on a part, so it either on a blank drawing or in a field away from the part itself. Select that edit sheet format. You can kind of see some changes happen there. One, the part we put on there went away. It's still there, it's just not at the sheet format level. As we add notes, if we select a note, we get a few different options over here that we probably used to seeing on a pretty regular basis. We can add some different arrows to them if we want, change the font, put different symbols in there. This is the symbol we want to concentrate on right here though, and it's called link to property. So if I select a note and then select link to property, I get a dialog box that prompts me to use custom properties from a couple of different places. Current document is the drawing itself, and so that's any custom properties we might have assigned to the drawing. The other option, which I chose for this, is called the model found here. You do not have to have a model on the drawing in order to choose this. Once you do choose that, you get a couple of different options here. I like to use the drawing view specified in the sheet properties, and this is basically the default view or the primary view that you put on there. So if I select that, it does let me choose from the list of custom properties that are there. If I don't see one, I can actually select this button here and it'll jump me to those, and I can add additional ones if I'd like. Once I've added them there, they'll show up in this list here. So for this particular one, we chose the model in the sheets. There's already one there, so it has selected that, and it's selected the properties. And I chose description. There was already a note there, so you can see that it added it on. But if I were to delete this, go back through that and then select description, it'll populate with that part. And I've done the same thing for several different options here. This date note is it's linked to a custom property that ties to the engineer date that we placed in there. Some of these are a little bit different. These are not tied to the custom property itself, but if I select it under the current document, I get some of these with the SW in front of them, which are some of those pre-populated ones. In this case, we're looking at current sheet, so that is sheet 1 of 1. So I selected SW-current sheet to populate that. For the second one there, that one is total sheets. So as I add sheets to the drawing, that automatically adds up. The same thing with sheet scale, size, some of those different things can all be tied to those SOLIDWORKS properties. You may notice that I had some drawing notes that were pre-populated in this, and I did go ahead and put those, in this case, into the sheet format. And it's the same, in the same way that I did below, except rather than selecting the whole note, I was able to just start a note, or I'm sorry, where my cursor is in the note. I can actually add one of these pieces of information in line with text. So in this case, I chose the drawing, and that description just had a dash in it. But if I choose the part and put description here, we can see that it adds that custom property information in line with the remainder of the text. So you have a couple different options with it. You can have it be the entirety of the text, or you can add some different notes to it. So what this allowed me to do in this case was add things like the material, the file name, and you may have some specific things to your organization that fit you a little bit better, but I can pre-populate a lot of those things, and the engineers don't have to come in and type anywhere in the title block what material they're making it out of. The machinist knows every time that he can look right here and see what material it's out of. If he wants to grab the model to put it into his CAM program, he knows right here what the name of that file is, so he can go look for it. So these are some ways that we can save that redundant data entry by pushing custom property information from parts all the way through to drawings. And we can also have that custom property information, similarly as we did in the part, pre-populated in our drawing template. So once we've completed what we're going to do in the sheet format, I can go ahead and select Edit Sheet. In this case, we put a part in here to demonstrate how those fields populate. I'm going to go ahead and close this so we can sort of do it as if we were starting from scratch. So we would have essentially a blank drawing here with no parts on it. If I go into the sheet format, you can see some of this sort of strange language. These are the indicators that it's looking for those particular custom properties. So if you see this $ PRP sheet, it's looking for that model information. But when I get out of the sheet format, it's just blank until we populate it otherwise. Once I've got my sheet format set, I want to make sure I capture that because I may want to use it on different things. So I do have an option here under File to specifically save the sheet format. In this case, it's already been saved as a part sheet format. I'm not going to resave it. But you can save that off separately. And remember, as I mentioned earlier, the sheet format is not the drawing template itself. A template consists of the sheet format and document settings. So we've completed our sheet format, we saved it, and now we want to come in and set some of those different options. And again, it's under document properties. These will be specific to the drawing itself. So if we wanted to change what our dimensions look like, any of these options here, we can go ahead and make those changes and save it. And then we'll go ahead and do a save as. And again, under this drop-down menu, Save as Type, we get an option for drawing templates. So again, it did jump to that default location. If I had removed that, it would no longer be there, and it wouldn't jump there. But if you need to go to browse to another spot where you want to save it, you can. I believe under File Locations, you can change the order of priority on these. So if I wanted the new folder that I created to be that priority, that's the location that it's going to jump to first when I go to save this. So I shouldn't have canceled there. So we'll do File Locations. I'll go ahead and move this one to the top, say OK. And if I save this, now it's a template, you can see that it jumps to that primary location. So lastly, as we did with the part, we do want to come into our options after we've saved our template out. And then if you want this to be a new default template, you would need to come under Default Templates, Drawings, select this, and say OK. And so now anytime I go to create a new drawing, it's going to pull up that template that we just created. So under drawing templates, we talked about the differences that are there between a part and an assembly, and that is editing that sheet format. Within that sheet format, we showed how we can link notes to properties and then save that sheet format separately to potentially be used in multiple templates. We applied some document settings to that and then saved it as a .drw.dot, which is a drawing template. And then we went back and double checked and set our file locations and our default template for drawings. The last one I want to look at is tables. No, not these tables. I couldn't find a good picture of the right table, so this works for now. I didn't mention this before, but your tables, you can go ahead and have these, you can insert them after if you'd like, or if you know some specific tables that are always going to be on your drawing, in this case, a revision table, you can have those added in ahead of time as part of your drawing template. Your tables can also be templates themselves. So if you wanted a revision table to be a specific way, some places put them at the bottom, in which case they would want the title at the bottom and the rows to build upward from there. You can customize all of that and save it out separate. And the way to do that is to select this, this little move symbol here, which highlights the entire table and brings up our properties dialog box in the left pane here. In order to save the whole table, you'll need to have all of it selected and be in this window here. But you can set up some specific things. SOLIDWORKS knows that this is a revision table, so it has some specific options to that. You can decide if you want to actually enable a symbol when you add a new revision, so if you want to point some different things out and then what shape that is, and then some of the different options just to change the border size and things like that. And you can also change, excuse me, how it attaches on a drawing itself. In this case, the drawing has an anchor point and it attaches to the upper right corner there. So this particular revision table is a custom one that I did make, and you can see when I click add revision, it gives me that revision and then gives me the option if I had a model in here to attach this symbol to it. Go ahead and delete this row here. To save the table, again, we'll select this upper right corner and then under File and Save As. You can see that it wants to save it as a template because that is the selection we have, and it knows that it is an actual revision table template. Something to note here is that the file location for your tables can be different than your location for maybe your parts or drawings and those types of things. If this were a bill of materials, we could, I don't think it'll let me because I don't have an assembly on here, but if I were to insert a bill of materials in here, I could do the same thing. I can select it, customize it, change which columns I want it to be, and then save it separately using that file save as. When we go under the system options here, and we look at file locations, document templates will cover the part, assembly, and drawing templates. So when it says document templates, that's what it's looking for here. If we want to get into some of our tables, we can start looking at this list and we can see, okay, there's one for a bend table. There's a whole table template location, a revision table. I think there's a bill of materials one, a BOM template here. So you can make all of those one folder if you'd like, but it is important to note that that the SOLIDWORKS system is looking for a different location for those, or not necessarily different, but a specific location for those, so that when you do go to use the function to insert a table from a different spot, it knows where to look and what those default tables are for you. So to recap today, we looked at why we're going to want to use templates. We can use them to drive standards and reduce data entry, communicate to other areas of our organization and even our customers potentially, to help shorten that wall between engineering and operations. Under templates for parts and assemblies, we looked at how to open a part and change the preferences, and then how to save that as a template and set the file locations and default templates. For drawing templates, again, we looked at editing the sheet format and how to link notes to properties, how to save the sheet format separate, apply document settings, and then finally save the drawing template and again set those file locations in default. And lastly, we looked at tables, how to insert a table, edit the features of the table, save it as a table template, noting that those are different for each type of table that you put in. And then we talked about how they can be embedded into a drawing template, but I should mention that you can insert those tables into parts and assembly annotation views if you'd like, and have those be part of your part and assembly templates as well. That's about all I had today for content. If anybody has any questions, I definitely want to stick around for a little while. There's a questions tab at the bottom of your window. There should be where you can type something in if you have any. I can read them out to everybody, and hopefully I can get that answered for you while we're here. So I got a few questions here. Let me see how I can, need to figure out how to expand it. So one of the questions I have is, how do you set up a user template standard for all users across the company? There's a couple different ways to do that, Eric. One of the ones that we covered today is that you can go through in SOLIDWORKS individually on each computer and set these up. When you're doing your installations, if you wanted to from an administrative image, you could go ahead and have these, I'm sorry, under system options here, you can have these file locations pushed out as well. typically, I believe these file locations also save to the user settings. So if you did want to sort of, get some user settings set up and then export those and maybe put them on a thumb drive and walk them around, you could do it that way as well. Thomas asked, when will this be posted on YouTube? I don't know for certain, Thomas. I believe it's within the next day or so. They're usually pretty quick about it. Ed asked, how did you show the link properties on the drawings format? So just to go back in again real quick, we're going to right click and edit the sheet format. And then any note that I select, and that can be any of these, it can be the note itself again, or in line with the text. There's the option here called link to property. And when I select that, I can choose the current document, which is the drawing, or the model, which is going to be placed into the drawing to pull those custom properties from. Paul asked, can templates contain sub-assemblies of parts or individual parts already inserted? To be honest, I haven't tried sub-assemblies. I know that you can have geometry in parts already. That's something that I would have to investigate a little bit, Paul, and try out. I've never tried it before. So Ed asked that $PRP sheet versus the value. So Ed, if there's, in this case, I was pointing to a model to look for those, and because there's no model in the drawing that I'm looking at, PRP sheet is the sort of code to tell you what it's looking for. If I get out of the edit sheet, you can see that that disappears. So it's just when I'm in the edit sheet that it shows me that value or that PRP sheet, and that's my indicator that that's what it's looking for. Thomas asked again, can I show the link to properties in the note block once more? So it's the same link when I'm in the note itself, instead of before I highlighted the entire note and then selected the property. To put it in line, you would actually want to double click into the note so that you are as if you were editing it. And then wherever your cursor is, if you click that link, it will insert that property as well. And Joe, maybe virtual parts, that may be. I definitely am going to give that a test, and I'll see if I can maybe add that to the notes when we post this to YouTube about the question. Thanks, everyone.